During my home inspection, the contractor found a note saying, "Whoever lives here next will die exactly like I did." I froze in the empty living room, watching Gerald's face drain of color as he held a crumpled piece of paper between trembling fingers. "Where exactly did you find that?" My voice came out steadier than I felt, but my heart was already racing. Gerald pointed toward the basement stairs with a shaking hand, his usual confidence completely gone. "Taped under the third step. I was checking for structural damage when I saw the corner sticking out like someone wanted it found." He handed me the note, and the handwriting looked frantic, desperate, like someone had written it while fighting for their life. The paper was yellowed and brittle around the edges, but the words were crystal clear. They made it look like an accident, carbon monoxide leak. But I sealed myself in the bedroom when I figured it out. Check the vents in the basement. They're watching from next door. Whoever lives here next will die exactly like I did. The real estate agent is in on it. Run before they know you found this. SK, October 15th, 2019. My hands started shaking as I read the date. That was exactly 4 years ago, and according to my realtor, the previous owner had died from an accidental carbon monoxide leak that same month. Gerald was already backing toward the front door, his contractor's instincts screaming danger. "We need to leave, right now. This isn't some prank or old ghost story." But something about the note felt wrong, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't fit together. Wait, if Sarah knew someone was trying to kill her and sealed herself in the bedroom, how did the carbon monoxide get to her? And why would she mention the real estate agent? Gerald stopped moving, his eyes darting between me and the basement door like he was calculating escape routes. Maybe she wrote the note before she figured out the real danger. Or maybe the carbon monoxide was just the cover story. We stood in the empty living room, both of us staring at that basement entrance like it might swallow us whole. The silence was deafening until we heard it. A soft scratching sound coming from below, rhythmic and deliberate, like fingernails dragging across wood in some kind of pattern. Gerald's tools crashed to the floor as he stumbled backward, his face going white. "There's someone down there, right now." The scratching stopped immediately, replaced by complete silence that felt somehow worse than the noise. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst as I pulled out my phone to call 911, but the screen showed no signal bars. The realtor had mentioned the house had dead zones due to the old construction, but my phone had worked perfectly fine outside just 20 minutes ago. "Gerald, does your phone work?" He checked his screen and shook his head, his face going even paler. "No bars, but it was working when I got here an hour ago." That's when we heard footsteps above us, slow and deliberate, moving across the second floor floorboards in a pattern that suggested someone familiar with the house layout. We weren't alone in this house, and whoever was up there had been waiting for us to find that note. Gerald grabbed the largest hammer from his scattered tools while I looked around desperately for anything that could be used as a weapon. The footsteps stopped directly above our heads, and I could swear I heard breathing through the ceiling, slow and controlled like someone listening to our conversation. "There's an attic access in the master bedroom," I whispered, remembering the floor plans my realtor had shown me. Someone could have been up there the whole time watching us. Gerald was already moving toward the front door, but when he grabbed the handle and turned, it wouldn't budge. The deadbolt was locked from the inside, and there was no key anywhere in sight. "Back door," he mouthed silently, pointing toward the kitchen. We crept through the house like we were walking through a minefield, every creak of the old floorboards sounding like gunshots in the oppressive silence that seemed to press down on us from all directions. The back door was also locked, but this time, there was something else that made my stomach drop. Fresh scratches around the lock mechanism, like someone had been picking it recently, and small metal shavings on the floor that suggested the locks had been tampered with while we were inside. Gerald tried his shoulder against the door, putting his full weight behind it, but it didn't move even a fraction of an inch. "Windows," I whispered, but when we checked every single window on the first floor, they had all been painted shut years ago, the paint thick and deliberately applied to prevent them from opening. We were trapped in this house with whoever was upstairs, and they had made sure we couldn't escape. The footsteps started again, but this time they were coming down the stairs, slow and measured, each step echoing through the entire house like a countdown to something terrible. Gerald and I pressed ourselves against the kitchen wall, hidden from direct view of the staircase, but with absolutely nowhere to run if we were discovered. "The basement," I whispered desperately. "There might be another way out down there. Maybe a bulkhead or old coal chute." Gerald shook his head violently, his eyes wide with terror. "That's where the scratching was coming from. That's where they want us to go." But the footsteps were getting closer, accompanied now by a soft humming that sounded almost cheerful, like someone who was genuinely enjoying themselves. We had no choice but to descend into the basement, and each step down felt like walking deeper into a trap that had been carefully prepared for us. Gerald's flashlight beam revealed something that made my blood freeze in my veins. Fresh camping gear in the corner, including a sleeping bag, food containers, battery-powered lantern, and what looked like surveillance equipment. Someone had been living down here, watching and waiting. How long have they been watching the house? Gerald's voice was barely audible, but in the silence it seemed to echo off the concrete walls. That's when I noticed something else that made me want to vomit. The walls were covered with photographs, hundreds of them, all carefully arranged in chronological order. Photos of women, all alone, all in houses just like this one, and each series of photos ended with newspaper clippings about their deaths. Accidental gas leaks, electrical fires, carbon monoxide poisoning, structural collapses, and in the center of the wall, like a shrine, was a photo of me taken through my apartment window last week while I was making dinner. Above it, written in red marker, next. Below that, a detailed timeline of my daily routine, my work schedule, my grocery shopping habits, even my Netflix viewing preferences. I had been watched and studied for weeks without knowing it. The footsteps stopped at the top of the basement stairs, and we could hear breathing, slow and deliberate, like someone savoring the moment before a long-anticipated event. Gerald aimed his flashlight at the stairs, and we saw feet in expensive dress shoes, not work boots like I'd expected. Whoever this was dressed well, probably blended in perfectly in normal society. "I know you found Sarah's note," a voice called down, calm and almost friendly, like someone greeting old friends. She was much smarter than the others. Figured out the carbon monoxide was just a cover story for something much more interesting. My mind raced as pieces fell into place. Sarah hadn't died from carbon monoxide poisoning. Someone had killed her after she discovered their operation, then staged the accident to cover their tracks. The other women weren't so clever. Accident after accident after accident. Gas leaks, electrical fires, carbon monoxide. Amazing how many ways old houses can kill people when you know what you're doing. The voice was getting closer, descending the stairs with measured confidence. But Sarah started asking questions, started testing her appliances, installing extra detectors, asking neighbors about the house's history. Had to get much more creative with her than the others. Gerald grabbed my hand and pulled me deeper into the basement, his flashlight revealing more disturbing details with each step. In the back corner, behind the old furnace, we found something that explained everything and made the situation infinitely worse. A hidden door, recently installed with professional precision, leading to what appeared to be a tunnel that connected to the house next door. This wasn't random. This was organized, systematic, and had been planned for a very long time. The tunnel was wide enough for someone to move freely between properties, and I could see electric cables running along the walls, suggesting a sophisticated setup. "You can't run forever," the voice called, now halfway down the stairs, and I could hear the smile in his tone. "I've been preparing this house for months. Every exit sealed, every window painted shut, every neighbor told that you were doing extensive renovations, and not to worry about any noise they might hear. They won't even call the police if you scream." The beam of a powerful flashlight cut through the darkness, searching for us methodically, and we pressed ourselves against the back wall, barely breathing, trying to become invisible in the shadows. "Sarah lasted 3 days down here before I got bored with the game," the voice continued conversationally. "Had to make it look like carbon monoxide in the end, but she knew the truth by then, knew that I'd been watching her, studying her, learning everything about her life before I started the process." The light moved closer, and I could see the outline of a man in an expensive suit, moving with the confidence of someone who had done this many times before. The real estate company doesn't know they're facilitating murders. They just think I'm a very thorough buyer who changes his mind a lot and has very specific requirements about house histories and neighborhood demographics. That's when I understood the full scope of what was happening. This person didn't just kill randomly. He bought houses, prepared them as elaborate death traps, then canceled his purchases so the houses would go back on the market for carefully selected victims. He was using the real estate system as a hunting ground, targeting vulnerable women who fit his preferred victim profile. Gerald found a loose brick in the foundation wall and pulled it free, revealing a gap just big enough for someone to crawl through. An old coal chute that hadn't been properly sealed when the house was renovated decades ago. "Go," he whispered urgently, pushing me toward the opening. "I'll hold him off. Give you time to get help." I wanted to argue, to find a way for both of us to escape, but the killer's flashlight was getting dangerously close to our hiding spot. "I'll come back for you," I whispered, knowing it might be a lie but needing to say something. Gerald just nodded and gripped his hammer tighter, positioning himself to make a stand. I squeezed through the coal chute, feeling decades of dust and debris scraping against my skin, trying not to think about what might be crawling around in that narrow space. Behind me I heard Gerald's flashlight beam meet the killers, followed by shouting, then the sound of a struggle, then a silence that made my stomach drop through the floor. I emerged in the neighbor's basement, gasping and covered in coal dust, disoriented but alive. I could see light coming from upstairs, signs of normal life that felt surreal after what I'd just experienced. I ran up their basement stairs, screaming for help before I even reached the door, my voice hoarse with terror and desperation. An elderly woman opened the door, took one look at my face and dirt-covered clothes, and immediately understood that something terrible was happening. "There's a man in the house next door," I gasped, trying to catch my breath. "He's got my contractor. He's been killing women. He had photos of all of them." The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Valdez, pulled me inside and locked her door while she called 911, her movements quick and efficient despite her age. Through her kitchen window, we could see the house I'd almost bought, dark and silent now. No sign of Gerald or the killer, just an ordinary-looking home that concealed unspeakable horrors. "How long has the house been empty?" I asked Mrs. Valdez while we waited for the police, needing to understand the timeline of events. "About 3 months," she said, "ever since that poor girl died. But I've seen lights over there at night, movement in the windows, someone coming and going at odd hours. I called the police twice, but they said it was probably squatters or the estate management company doing maintenance." She paused, looking troubled. "Though now that I think about it, the man I saw looked too well dressed to be a squatter. Always wore suits, carried a briefcase, looked like he belonged in the neighborhood. The police sirens were getting closer, but I couldn't shake the feeling it might already be too late for Gerald. I thought about his family, his wife and 2 young children who were expecting him home for dinner, and the guilt threatened to overwhelm me. He'd saved my life by insisting on that basement inspection, and now he might die because of it. The police surrounded the house with tactical gear and flashlights, treating it as an active hostage situation based on my report. But when they finally breached the doors after what felt like hours of preparation, they found the house empty. No Gerald, no killer, just the basement full of photos and camping gear, and evidence of something far worse than a single murder. Detective Angela Torres showed me what they'd discovered in the killer's makeshift command center, a detailed journal documenting 12 murders across 3 states, all made to look like household accidents, with Sarah Knight listed as victim number 11. According to the journal, I was supposed to be number 12, the culmination of months of careful planning and surveillance. But Gerald was nowhere to be found, and there was fresh blood on the basement floor that the crime scene techs were already analyzing. The tunnel connects to 3 different houses in the neighborhood, Detective Torres explained, showing me a crude map found among the killer's possessions. He's been using this network to move around undetected, watching potential victims, preparing multiple murder sites simultaneously. The scope of the operation was staggering. The killer had been operating like a serial killer and real estate investor combined, buying properties in strategic locations, preparing them for months, then targeting specific women who fit his preferred victim profile. He scouts single women buying houses, then outbids them at the last second using shell companies. When the houses go back on the market, he makes sure his target gets the deal by eliminating other buyers through intimidation or sabotage. The journal entries revealed months of surveillance for each victim, learning their routines, their fears, their weaknesses, their support systems. He gets them comfortable with the house, lets them settle in, then stages the accidents after they're emotionally attached to their new home and less likely to leave at the first sign of trouble. The investigation expanded rapidly as detectives realized they were dealing with a sophisticated criminal network. The killer's journal contained detailed information about real estate agents, home inspectors, insurance investigators, and even police officers who could be manipulated or bribed to support his narrative of accidental deaths. He specifically targets recent divorcees, women new to town, anyone who might not have strong local support networks to ask questions if something seems wrong, Detective Torres explained. Sarah Knight figured it out because she started connecting with her neighbors and asking about the house's history. Most of his other victims were too isolated to piece together the pattern. The journal also revealed that the killer had been operating under multiple identities, buying and selling properties across several states, always staying one step ahead of any investigation that might connect his crimes. He'd even created fake property management companies to explain his presence at various houses, giving him legitimate reasons to access buildings and interact with potential victims. 3 days later, Gerald's body was found in a storage unit across town, but the circumstances of his death provided the breakthrough that investigators needed. Gerald had managed to activate a recording app on his phone before he died, and the killer's voice was captured for 38 minutes as he explained his methods and motivations in disturbing detail. "I know houses better than anyone," the voice said with chilling pride. "Every way they can kill, every system that can fail, every accident that's believable to investigators who don't want to dig too deep." The recording revealed the killer's real name as Dr. Nathan Cross, a former home inspector and contractor who'd lost his professional licenses after being caught falsifying safety reports for money. But instead of leaving the industry, he'd decided to use his expertise for something much more sinister. "The women are just practice," Nathan's voice continued on the recording, speaking to Gerald like he was explaining a hobby to a friend. "Each one teaches me something new about investigation procedures, insurance protocols, family grief responses." Sarah was supposed to be easy. Divorced teacher, no family nearby, recently moved to town, buying her first house alone. But she was too smart for her own good. Started testing her appliances obsessively, installing extra smoke detectors, asking neighbors about the previous owners. The recording captured Nathan describing how he'd been forced to abandon his usual carbon monoxide method with Sarah and resort to more direct violence, which he considered a professional failure. "I prefer the accidents because they're cleaner, more artistic. Direct murder is so crude, so obvious. Anyone can stab someone or shoot them. It takes real skill to make someone's own home kill them slowly while they trust it to keep them safe." Gerald's recording also revealed Nathan's long-term plans, which extended far beyond simple serial killing. "I'm building a database of vulnerable women across the country, creating a network of prepared properties, establishing relationships with corrupt officials who can be bought to look the other way. This isn't just about killing people. It's about perfecting a system that could operate indefinitely without detection." Nathan had apparently been planning to franchise his operation, teaching other killers his methods in exchange for a percentage of their victims' life insurance payouts. The recording captured him, explaining how certain types of deaths triggered automatic insurance investigations while others were rubber-stamped as accidental, and how he'd learned to manipulate the system to ensure quick payouts to carefully prepared beneficiaries. "Gerald was never supposed to find that note," Nathan's voice admitted toward the end of the recording. "Sarah hid it too well. I spent weeks searching for it after I killed her, worried that it might surface during the estate sale. When your contractor found it during his inspection, it ruined months of careful preparation." Nathan explained that he'd been watching my apartment for 6 weeks, learning my schedule, identifying my vulnerabilities, preparing psychological profiles to predict how I'd react to different scenarios. She was perfect, recently divorced, new to the area, buying her first house alone, works from home so she'd be isolated during the day. I had everything mapped out: gradual carbon monoxide exposure over 3 months, escalating health problems that would be attributed to stress from the divorce and new job, eventual death that would look like tragic accident. The recording captured Nathan's frustration that Gerald's discovery of the note had forced him to accelerate his timeline and abandon his preferred methods. The manhunt for Nathan Cross expanded nationally as investigators realized the scope of his crimes extended across multiple states. His storage unit contained detailed files on over 40 potential victims, including photographs, schedules, financial information, and psychological profiles that demonstrated months of surveillance for each woman. He had backup plans for backup plans, Detective Torres explained to me during one of our follow-up interviews. If one victim became too suspicious or moved away, he had 5 others in the pipeline ready to take her place. If one prepared house was compromised, he had 3 more in different neighborhoods. The investigation revealed that Nathan had been operating for at least 5 years, possibly longer, and had perfected his methods through trial and error on victims whose deaths had never been connected to him. Some of the women in his files were still alive, still living in houses he'd prepared as death traps, completely unaware of the danger they were in. Federal agents launched coordinated raids across 6 states, evacuating women from houses Nathan had prepared and arresting associates who'd helped him with property purchases, documentation fraud, and victim surveillance. He recruited real estate agents, contractors, insurance investigators, even some police officers who needed extra money and weren't too concerned about where it came from, Detective Torres told me. The corruption extended much deeper than just one serial killer. He'd built an entire network of people who benefited from keeping his activities hidden. Some of Nathan's accomplices had been paid to steer specific victims toward prepared houses, while others had been bribed to ensure that death investigations were concluded quickly without thorough examination of potential evidence. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering, involving dozens of people across multiple professions who'd turned murder into a profitable business enterprise. 2 weeks after Gerald's body was found, Nathan Cross was spotted at a gas station in Nevada, apparently trying to establish a new base of operations in a state where he hadn't previously operated. But instead of running when police surrounded him, Nathan surrendered peacefully, almost seemed relieved that his operation had finally been exposed. He kept detailed records of everything, Detective Torres told me after Nathan's arrest. Financial records, victim files, property documents, even recordings of some of his killings that he apparently made for his own entertainment. Nathan's confession filled in gaps that investigators hadn't been able to piece together from physical evidence alone, and his cooperation led to the arrest of 17 accomplices across 6 states. In exchange for avoiding the death penalty, Nathan provided information that allowed authorities to locate the bodies of 3 additional victims whose deaths had been ruled accidental. During his interrogation, Nathan revealed details about his psychological motivations that chilled everyone involved in the investigation. "I didn't start out planning to kill people," he admitted in recorded interviews. "I started out just wanting to understand how houses could fail, how accidents happened, how deaths were investigated. But then I realized that I could control all of those variables, and it became like solving puzzles." Nathan described each murder as an intellectual challenge, a problem to be solved using his technical knowledge and understanding of human psychology. The actual killing was never the point. The point was creating perfect accidents that would never be questioned, building systems that could operate automatically, designing deaths that would teach me something new about investigation procedures. He spoke about his victims with the detached professionalism of someone discussing engineering projects, showing no remorse for the lives he'd destroyed. Nathan's journal entries, read aloud during his trial, revealed the calculating mindset of someone who viewed human life as raw material for experimentation. Each woman represents a different set of variables to be tested, one entry read. Age, education level, social connections, financial status, mental health history, family relationships. By controlling these variables and observing the results, I can refine my methods and predict outcomes with increasing accuracy. Nathan had apparently been working toward a theoretical model that would allow him to select and kill victims with mathematical precision, eliminating any element of chance or unpredictability from his crimes. His ultimate goal had been to create a system so reliable that he could guarantee specific outcomes for any given victim profile. The trial lasted 8 months and revealed details about Nathan's crimes that made national headlines. Families of his confirmed victims attended every day of proceedings, seeking closure and justice for loved ones whose deaths had been dismissed as accidents for years. Sarah Knight's sister gave testimony about how her family had accepted the carbon monoxide explanation because they trusted the investigation, never imagining that Sarah's death had been carefully planned and executed by someone who'd been watching her for months. "We blamed ourselves for not visiting more often," for not recognizing signs that something was wrong, for not being better family members, she said through tears. We never thought to blame the system that failed to protect her from a predator who used our trust against us. Gerald's family sued the real estate company and home inspection industry for failing to implement adequate safety protocols that might have prevented his death. His wife testified about how Gerald had always been cautious about safety, how he'd insisted on thorough inspections even when clients tried to rush him, how he'd died doing exactly what he'd always done, protecting people from dangerous houses. He saved that woman's life by finding that note, she said, but the system should have protected him too. There should have been protocols for situations like this, backup plans, communication systems that would have prevented him from dying alone in that basement. The lawsuit resulted in industry-wide changes to home inspection procedures, including mandatory safety protocols for inspectors working alone and new requirements for background checks on property sellers. Nathan Cross was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of parole, but his case led to broader examinations of how serial killers exploit vulnerabilities in real estate, insurance, and death investigation systems. This case changed how we think about serial murder, Detective Torres told me during our final interview. Most serial killers operate impulsively, following psychological compulsions that eventually lead to mistakes in capture. Nathan operated like a businessman, treating murder as a technical problem to be solved through research, planning, and systematic execution. His methods had been so sophisticated that several of his early victims' deaths were never reclassified as homicides, even after his confession, because the evidence had been contaminated or destroyed years earlier. The house where everything started was demolished 6 months after Nathan's arrest, but the empty lot still gives me nightmares when I drive past it. Mrs. Valdez moved away shortly after the trial, unable to live next door to a crime scene that had claimed so many lives. The neighborhood association installed security cameras and established a watch program, but the damage to the community's sense of safety was permanent. You never think about how easy it would be for someone to watch you, to learn your routines, to plan your death while you're just living your normal life, Mrs. Valdez told me before she moved. He turned something as basic as buying a house into a hunting ground, and now none of us will ever feel safe the same way again. I never bought another house. The experience destroyed my trust in real estate agents, home inspectors, even my own ability to recognize danger when it's carefully hidden. Gerald's family and I stay in touch, bonded by the shared trauma of losing someone to Nathan's calculated cruelty. His children ask about him sometimes, wanting to know why their daddy died helping a stranger. And I try to explain that their father was a hero who saved my life by insisting on doing his job thoroughly, even when it put him at risk. Sarah Knight's note, the piece of paper that started everything, is now preserved as evidence in a federal database of serial killer artifacts. But I keep a photocopy in my wallet as a reminder that sometimes the dead can still protect the living if they are brave enough to leave warnings behind. The ripple effects of Nathan's crimes continue years after his imprisonment. Property values in affected neighborhoods have never fully recovered, and several real estate companies have gone out of business due to lawsuits and reputation damage. The home inspection industry has implemented new safety protocols and background check requirements, but many inspectors have left the profession entirely, unable to work alone in empty houses without fear. Insurance companies have developed new algorithms for detecting patterns that might indicate systematic fraud, but Nathan's methods were so sophisticated that investigators are still discovering properties he'd prepared as potential crime scenes. Some of these houses are still occupied by families who have no idea they're living in carefully designed death traps, and the process of identifying and securing these properties continues as a massive undertaking involving multiple federal agencies.